Hey everyone, Andre here, and today we're diving into what might be the most interesting piece that Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 has given us, Mysteria Ecclesiae. Now, I've had my hands on this DLC for a couple days now, and let me tell you, this final expansion for Henry Journey is something else entirely. It's not what you'd expect from a final, and honestly, that's its biggest strength, and maybe its most divisive element here. So right off the bat, let me say this. If you're expecting some grand epic conclusion with massive battles or world-ending stakes, you're gonna be surprised. Mysteria Ecclesiae takes a completely different approach. After spending about 7 hours with it, I can say that Warhorse Studios has crafted something that feels more like a really well-produced mystery thriller set in medieval times than your typical RPG expansion. And you know what? It mostly works. Let's talk about what you're actually getting here. The DLC drops you into Setlets Monastery, a brand new area that's been completely inaccessible until now. And when I say it drops you in, it literally locks you in there for the duration of the story. And yes, you heard that right. Once you start this thing properly, you're committed for the long haul. No fast traveling back to check on your forge from the last DLC, no quick trips to the market to stock up supplies. You're stuck here dealing with the mysterious plague outbreak in a quarantine reel. Now, before anybody panics about being trapped, the monastery itself is surprisingly dense with content. We're talking a fully realized medieval monastery complex with fields, gardens, and living quarters, a proper library, and all the infrastructure you would expect from a place that is basically self-sufficient. The attention to detail here is a classic Kingdom Come. Every monk has their own bed. There's a functional brewery, herbs, gardens that actually make sense for medieval medicine, and the whole place feels lived in rather than just being a video game level. The story kicks off when you escort this physician named Ulrich to the monastery. He's trying to get permission to visit the imprisoned Queen Wenceslas, which ties into the political backdrop of the main game, but the political stuff takes a back seat real quick when people start dropping off like flies from this mysterious illness. And here's where things get very interesting, my friends. This isn't just another fetch quest disguised as a mystery. The investigation mechanics actually require you to pay attention, talk to people, piece things together in timelines, and use your brain rather than just following quest markers, which I am starting to appreciate. I gotta be honest though, the pacing in the first hour can feel a bit slow. You're doing a lot of talking, a lot of walking around, getting familiar with the layout, and if you're expecting immediate action, you might find yourself checking your watch, but stick with it because once the quarantine hits and the monastery goes full lockdown mode, the atmosphere completely changes. Guards patrol the grounds, you need to sneak around to investigate certain areas, and suddenly this peaceful sanctuary becomes this intense, almost catastrophic. The gameplay loop is really different here from anything else in Kingdom Come. When you first arrive, you're stripped from your weapons and your armor because hey, it's a monastery, not a field. This forced me to approach situation differently than I normally would. I wouldn't just charge in swinging my sword when things got dicey. Instead, I had to rely on stealth, persuasion, and actually using scholarship skills that I've been neglecting for most of the game. And let me tell you, if you've been ignoring your non-combat skills, DLC is going to be a wake-up call. Stealth becomes crucial when you need to investigate areas you're supposed to be in during lockdown. Scholarship helps you understand medical text and piece together clues about plague, and your speech skills are essential for getting information out of the paranoid monks who think everyone might be infected. The investigation itself is well structured. You're not just going from point A to point B collecting evidence, you're actually interviewing witnesses, cross-referencing their stories, examining symptoms, and trying to figure out not just what's causing the plague, but why is it happening now and who might benefit from it. There's this whole subplot about philosophical factions within the monastery that adds another layer to the mystery here. And one thing that I really appreciated was how they handled the plague doctor's mask crafting. It's completely optional, but if you take time to gather the materials and craft it, you get this piece of equipment that actually protects you from getting infected during certain interactions. Not iconic beak mask that you might expect, but it's that nice touch that rewards player who the extra mile. Now for the combat, and when it does happen, it feels way more impactful because of the scarcity. There's maybe 3 or 4 real combat encounters in the entire DLC, which means each one feels more meaningful rather than just being a group of bandits on the road. The lack of usual gear means you need to be creative. Maybe you steal a guard's weapon, maybe you craft some potions to give yourself an edge, or maybe just avoid the fight entirely through clever dialogue or stealth. And speaking of dialogue, this really went heavy with dialogue. The writing here is some of the best in the entire game. Every character feels, from the paranoia infirmarian who's convinced the plague is divine punishment, to the young novice who's using the chaos to explore ideas that would normally get him in trouble. The conversations feel natural, and there's a good balance between period appropriate language and actually being understandable. The monastery setting itself becomes almost like a character. During the day, you see monks going about their routines, prayer, work, study, meals, but at night you're sneaking around trying to uncover the truth, and those same familiar spaces become a maze-like and threatening. The sound design deserves special mention here too. The echoes of the footsteps in the stone corridors, the distant sounds of prayers, the occasional call from a sick patient, it all builds this atmosphere that's generally unsettling at times. Now let's talk about all the new toys and goodies that the DLC offers, the new gear and rewards, because that's always a big draw for DLC. You get a new sword, a complete armor set, and some unique potions with effects that are usually useful outside of the DLC, and a bunch of skill books. The library alone is worth exploring thoroughly. I found books that boosted my reading, my alchemy, and even some combat skills. The new potions are particularly interesting. There's an anti-inflammatory one that gives you strength and agility buffs over time, which is going to be useful for any build. The main story will run you about 6 to 8 hours depending on how thorough you are, but there's easily another couple of hours outside of side content if you really explore everything. And unlike some DLCs where the side stuff feels just like padding, here it actually enriches the main narrative. You learn more about the monastery history, the relationships between the monks, and there's even some touching personal stories mixed in. Performance wise, I ran into one weird issue where the monastery map was completely blacked out when I first arrived. It sorted itself out after a couple of quests, but it was really annoying for the first hour when I was trying to learn the layout. Other than that, no major bugs or quest breaking issues, which is actually really refreshing for Kingdom Come release. Now I have to address one thing that might disappoint some players. As I mentioned earlier, this doesn't feel like a grand final to Henry's story. If you're expecting closure on his personal journey or some epic confrontation that's been building since the main game, you're not getting it here. This is essentially a really well crafted side story that happens to be the last piece of the content, and while the story itself is engaging, it does feel somewhat disconnected from Henry's. The DLC exists as its own area completely cut out from the main game world. You can't see it from the outside, you need to load into it, and once you're there you might as well be in a different game. This isolation works for the quarantine storytelling that they're telling, but it does make the whole experience feel a bit more removed from everything else that you've done in Kingdom. With that being said, the way they handle the player choice here is excellent. There are two main endings to the DLC and several smaller variations based on how you handle individual quests and characters. Without spoiling anything, the choices you make actually feel consequential, and the resolution changes pretty significantly. It's not just picking the nice option or the mean option, you need to think about the implications of your decision. One thing that really stood out to me was how relevant the story feels in our current world. Watching people react to fear, denial, and suspicion to mysterious illness hits different after we all been through in the last couple years. There's this one scene early on in the lockdown that gave me chills because of how familiar it felt. The progression system in this is a little interesting as well. Since you're stripped of all your gear, a lot of your combat becomes irrelevant. Instead, you're gaining experience skills that you might have ignored: stealth, pickpocketing, lock picking, reading, and alchemy. But by the time I finished, my Henry felt more like a medieval detective than a knight, which was a refreshing change of pace. I also want to mention that the DLC does a great job of respecting your time. When you finish, you leave your monastery, they actually ask if you want to keep your current loadout or switch back to what you entered with. After several hours of scrambling for equipment, I really appreciated not having to sort through my inventory to get my original gear back. The religious aspect is handled with surprisingly carefulness. This is a monastery, so faith and philosophy are the central themes, but it never feels preachy or one-sided. You got your dedicated believers, skeptics, and everyone in between, and the game lets you engage with these ideas however you want. You can play Henry as a faithful Christian or a pessimistic skeptic, or anywhere in between, and dialogue options support all of these approaches. So who is this DLC really for? If you love the investigation quest in the main game, if you enjoyed the monetary sequence in the first Kingdom Come, or if you just want more well-written medieval storytelling, you're gonna have a great time here. But if you're primarily in it for the combat, if you found the slower paced quest in the main game boring, or if you're expecting to wrap up Henry in a definitive way, you might walk away disappointed with this one. The price point is something to consider as well. While the pricing is about $20 for the DLC, for 6 to 8 hours of main content plus side quests, that feels fair, especially considering the quality of what's here. It's definitely the meat meatiest of all the 3 DLC, even if it doesn't have the unique mechanics like the shield painting or the forge management from the previous ones. What surprises me the most is how confident Warhorse was in making their final DLC such a departure from what you might expect. No big battles, no dramatic confrontations, just a tightly crafted mystery in a beautifully realized setting. It takes some balls in your post-launch content on such a quiet note, but I think it mostly paid off. The character here work is exceptional. Every NPC feels like they have their own life, their own secrets. These aren't just givers, they're people with complex motivations, lethal reactions to an extraordinary situation. I do wish there was more connection to the main game's threads, a few references to events from your adventure, maybe some returning characters, something to make this feel less like a standalone episode and more like a part of Henry's journey. As it stands, the environmental storytelling deserves a shout out as well. You can piece together so much of the monastery history and current state just by exploring. The worn stones where generations of monks walked the same paths, the marginalia in the library books revealing personal thoughts and disagreements, subtle differences in the different monk cells showing their personalities. It's this attention to detail that makes Kingdom Come special, and it's on full display here. Combat, when it does occur, feels weighty and consequential. Without your usual arsenal, every fight is a risk. I found myself avoiding combat when possible, not because I couldn't win, because it made sense for the story. Henry is not there as a warrior, he's there as an investigator, and the game rewards you for remembering that. The stealth sections are generally well designed. The AI can be inconsistent. Sometimes guard will spot you across the courtyard in the dark, other times you can practically walk right past them when they won't even bat an eye. It's not game breaking, but it can be frustrating when you're trying to be this methodical and the game system works against you. One aspect that I really did enjoy was how well the DLC uses time. The plague progresses over several days and you can see it spreading throughout the monastery. More beds in the infirmary fills up, monks that you spoke with earlier might get sick later. The general atmosphere becomes increasingly intense. It creates this sense of urgency that drives you forward even when the pacing is slowed down. The voice acting throughout is spectacular. Every character sounds distinct and believable. From the abbot to the nervous kitchen staff, the performances really sell the mounting paranoia and fear as the situation deteriorates. Special mention goes to whoever voiced Brother Nevlas. His transition from helpful to suspicious to outright paranoia is brilliantly performed. Mechanically, the DLC doesn't introduce any major new system, which might disappoint some players. The previous DLC brought shield painting and forge management is content to use for existing systems in new ways, but Mysteria Ecclesiae is content to use systems in new ways. Personally, I'm fine with this. Not every expansion needs to reinvent the wheel, and the focus on investigation and social stealth makes a good use of what's already there. The puzzle elements, not incredibly complex, are satisfying to solve. You're piecing together timelines, figuring out who was there when people got sick, identifying patterns in the symptoms. Is detective work that actually requires you to think rather than just following objective quest marks. I wish more games challenged their players in this way. Visually, the monastery is gorgeous. The contrast between the austere stone and the architecture in the luxurious gardens, the play of candlelight in the dark corridors, the detail in the illustrated manuscripts is all beautifully realized. This is Kingdom Come at its best, creating a sense of place that feels authentic and lived in. If I did have to criticize something, it would be the lack of replay value once you know the solution to the mystery. A second playthrough loses a lot of impact. Sure, you can try different approaches and I see alternate endings, but the core experience is definitely the best through the first playthrough. The item management in the early sections can be frustrating too. Without your usual gear, you're scrambling for the basic equipment, and the monastery doesn't exactly have an armory laying around. It forces you to be creative, which is good, but it also can lead to some tedious inventory juggling. So here's the bottom line on Mysteria Ecclesiae. It's a bold, confident piece of storytelling that succeeds more often than it fails. It won't be for everyone, especially those expecting some heavy combat or a final to Henry's adventures, but if you're willing to embrace something different, something that prioritizes investigation and atmosphere over your actions, you're in for a treat here. This has come Deliverance at its most ambitious, and not in terms of scale, but in terms of storytelling and player trust. It assumes that you're smart enough to piece together the clues, patient enough to let the mystery unfold, and engaged enough to care about the fate of the monastery full of monks that you've just met. And for the most part, those assumptions pay off. As the final piece of Kingdom Come 2 content, it's an oddly fitting conclusion, not because it wraps up everything in a neat bow, but because it represents everything this does best: historical authenticity, complex characters, player choice that matters, and a willingness to let players serve a story rather than just the other way around. Would I recommend it? If you enjoyed the base game or if you're hungry for more quality content, absolutely. If you're specifically looking for closure to Henry's story or expecting an epic final, maybe temper those expectations. This is a side story, but one that's actually damn good. The fact that this is for Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 and probably for Henry stories overall, it does make me a bit sad. Warhorse created something special with this series, and Mysteria, despite being a quieter ending than expected, shows that they haven't lost their touch. Whatever they do next, whatever Kingdom Come 3 or something entirely different is, I'll be paying attention. Before I wrap this up, I do want to mention that despite the quarantine setting hitting close to home for obvious reasons, the DLT never feels heavy-handed about it. It's using historical reality. Monasteries really did deal with plague outbreaks back in the day to tell a story. Monasteries really did deal with plague outbreak back in the day to tell an engaging story, not to make some grand settlement about current events. The ending, which everyone feels earned. Your choices throughout the investigations really matter, and the solution reflects the kind of investigations you've been. It's not about good versus evil, it's about how you balance justice and mercy in an impossible situation. Look, Mysteria Ecclesiae isn't perfect, the pacing can drag, the light combat approach won't appeal to everyone, and the disconnect from the main game feels like a missed opportunity, but it's also thoughtful, atmospheric, and absolutely engaging in a way that most DLCs aren't. It takes risks and trust the players and delivers you something unique. In a world where most is just more of the same with a different coat of paint, Mysteria Ecclesiae dares to be something different. It's not quite the ending that I would have expected from Kingdom Come 2, but after spending a few days with it, I think it might be the ending that the game deserves. Thoughtful, complex, and uncompromising in this. So that's it for this DLC review, guys. A mystery worth solving, even if it's not the final that you expected. If you enjoyed what Kingdom Come had to offer just beyond the swordplay, you owe yourself to check this one out. And hey, if you want to catch more gaming content and maybe watch me fumble through some of these investigation sequences live, drop by my Twitch channel. Link is in the description. We're building something special over there, playing everything from new releases to classic RPGs. I love to see you in the chat, so come by. Thank you for watching. This has been Andre, and remember, sometimes the best adventures are the ones that challenge what you'd expect. Until next time, keep gaming, stay curious, stay safe, stay smart, stay alpha, and I'll see you in the next one.